What is up, you guys? You already know what it is. It's time for another video. I'm talking about a TV program which was unexpected in the sense that nobody thought it could work, purely because it happened 30 or more years after the original film sort of was released, and a lot of reboots and things like that don't always do justice to the original content. But when this TV show came out in 2018 on YouTube Premium, yes, I joined YouTube Premium just for this, it literally took the world by storm, and ever since it moved from YouTube to now Netflix last year, it literally just blew up and became one of the best TV adaptations of a film around. It's the best around, and if that doesn't give it away, it is none other than Cobra Kai, which is a show that I absolutely love, and I first watched back in 2018. So I was waiting for season 3 for such a long time until it finally moved to Netflix and season 3 was released. I'm a huge Karate Kid fan, so this is a video that I'm so excited to do. Let's just get into talking about what makes Cobra Kai such a good show and how it does justice to the Karate Kid, but without changing too much, but also by making it its own. And this is why it's a genius program. Cobra Kai is a television show based on a 3-decade almost old film, The Karate Kid, starring Macchio and William Zabka. But ever since sort of Cobra Kai came out, and then I've been rewatching Karate Kid, don't you think that William Zabka looks a little bit like Logan Paul? Like a young William Zabka looks like Logan Paul. Like, let me know if you've noticed that as well. I don't know what it is. I think it's the hair, the blonde hair, the way his hairstyle just looks like Logan Paul. I don't know, let me know. Cobra Kai back in 2018 on YouTube Premium, and then it moved to Netflix in 2020, where we got the release of season 3. Then in 2020, Netflix got the rights. So that's why there was a delay on season 3 coming out on YouTube, because it was basically just floating in the air, like, where is it going to go? YouTube didn't want it anymore, so then they couldn't release season 3 until Netflix finally got the rights, and then it moved over to Netflix in 2020, and that's when we got season 3, and that's when the show just basically blew up and became even more popular than it did back when it was on YouTube. Because I was watching it back in 2018, and I'll say to people like, have you seen Cobra Kai? And they're like, are you talking about the Karate Kid? And it's like, no, have you seen Cobra Kai? It's on YouTube, but obviously you had to have YouTube Premium to be able to watch the show. It's huge. I know people that are not necessarily Karate Kid fans that absolutely love Cobra Kai. And why? It has a lot of love, humor and heart, and I think those 3 components are what makes Cobra Kai fit into today's generation, both for the nostalgic factor but also for a whole new generation of fans. Because I love this show, before we mention all the amazing things that make Cobra Kai what it is, there are just a couple little things that don't necessarily annoy me. Like, I really don't mind it, but I know it annoys a lot of people, and just few little things that I question about the show that kind of take it out of reality a little. With Daniel, obviously we know he's now successful. He has his own car dealership with his wife, and he's got 2 obviously teenage kids, and he's, you know, very successful at what he does. But he uses karate quite a lot to, I guess, up his success. So like when he's selling a car or whatever, dealing with a customer, he gives them a bonsai tree, which is obviously a nod back to the first Karate Kid when Miyagi gave him a bonsai tree. And then he uses sort of karate tactics in his sales and in his sort of advertisements, where he's like, does it say kick or slice your prices down or something? And that's basically, you know, he's doing some karate moves and stuff. So it's basically like he's using his success of when he was a teenager and he won the karate tournament, to now sell cars and be successful, which really wouldn't work in the real world unless you were probably like a famous athlete back in the day, and now you've got your own business and people obviously are supporting you because of that. But obviously he was just a kid that won a tournament and he's now successful 30 years later by using that. So that's the only thing that didn't make sense. But also, William Zabka, Johnny Lawrence, I know he's like a middle-aged man or whatever, and he didn't grow up around technology, but how do you not know what Facebook is? How are you that sort of delusional when it comes to technology and what Facebook is, what social media is and things like that? I understand not everyone's obviously gonna be so in tune with social media, especially if you haven't grown up around it, but to not know what Facebook is. And he makes references about like Wi-Fi and things like that. So that's the only thing that makes me think like it's a little bit like not realistic, but I guess it taps into obviously the humor aspect of it and the fact that Johnny Lawrence is not very successful in his career, so he never really maybe needed to use like technology and stuff in his career and things like that, whereas Daniel did. But other than those 2 points, which are really like minor points, other than those 2 points, the show is just brilliant and it's genius. So if you haven't watched it, I hope the rest of the video is the reason why you watch Cobra Kai. So now let's get into the good points, I guess, about what makes Cobra Kai the best show around. So when the original Karate Kid was released back in the 80s, it was pretty much viewed as a Rocky knockoff, if you will, because obviously you had this underdog kid who was getting picked on, and he wanted to obviously, he took up karate and he's like the unlikely champion, but he ends up winning. And obviously in Rocky, Sylvester Stallone's character, he is the underdog, he's the unlikely champion who beats Creed, who is a world champion, and it's kind of that same concept and formula. And you had the same or similar team behind Rocky as you did with the Karate Kid. Had the same director in both, so obviously he took elements from Rocky and brought them into the Karate Kid, so you really see that same sort of formula in both. What Karate Kid does well, and I think is what made the show work, rather than just sticking to that same formula that the Karate Kid did, because I don't think they'll ever be able to replicate that same formula again, but what it did differently is basically take the John Hughes formula of, okay, you had this group of teenagers in the 80s, these popular teenagers, and putting them now into present day life and what happens with them throughout the years. Basically, when you watch a teen movie, you don't see sort of what happens next. Same with rom-coms, you never see what happens next to the characters. They end it with this like honeymoon period, they're so in love, but you never see what happens next. And I think this is what Cobra Kai did well. It didn't try to glamorize anything. It basically took those characters and said, okay, yes, one of them is not so successful. The traumas that he went through in high school, and obviously the trauma of losing a Karate Kid tournament, really affected him, and now he's not so successful, he's not where he's at in life, and he's basically reminiscing about his teen years, whereas the other one has sort of put that behind him. Yes, he still uses karate as a way to become successful, but he's not dwelling on the past or always feeling nostalgic or anything like that. And it really shows that different dynamic, and it shows what happens next basically, which is so clever. And I think because it was created by 3 Karate Kid fans, they've really done it justice and not just glamorized anything or, you know, made everything so like perfect and their lives are now perfect. You would have thought Johnny would have gone on to be successful and had a good life because he was rich, but you really go deep into who that character is, and not everything is as it seems on the outside. As you know, in the Karate Kid, if you haven't watched the Karate Kid, where have you been? Like, why are you even here right now? But if you haven't seen the Karate Kid, or even if you have, you know that Johnny plays a rich bully in high school, and then Daniel plays a new kid from Jersey, the underdog with a single mum, and now their characters have sort of switched roles. as I sort of explained earlier. And what makes this new concept work is because it didn't just focus on Daniel again. It didn't just focus on Daniel's perspective, because as we know in the film, Daniel, you know, believed that how he won the tournament, how he was as a character was right, and that Johnny was wrong, and that Johnny was just a bully. So he believed obviously the crane kick was legal, whereas Johnny believed it was illegal. And we spent over 30 years rooting for Daniel, rooting for his character, wanting him to win, wanting him to succeed, wanting him to get his own back on Johnny and beat him in the tournament. And we really didn't like Johnny as a character. I mean, I didn't like Johnny as a character, I don't know about you, but it kind of is the same formula that you watch in How I Met Your Mother, you know, when they reunited Daniel and Johnny, and Barney was always on Johnny's side and was like, he's a true hero in Karate Kid. And this is what basically what Cobra Kai is. It's showing Johnny and Johnny's side of the story and Johnny's perspective. So now we get to see it through his eyes. We get more of a character development there, and we get to see his past with flashbacks and how he became who he is and why he was a bully. Because we know that he didn't have a great upbringing, which we never really would have known, and we never really would have understand him until Cobra Kai. We know that obviously from Johnny's point of view, the crane kick was illegal. And I know a lot of people that think that as well. And we can see that he's never fully recovered from that moment, because, you know, his whole life was based around karate and Cobra Kai, and his sensei. His sensei Kreese. So obviously from that moment we know that things just went downhill for Johnny, and we get to experience that through his eyes now. Ever since watching Cobra Kai, I kind of have a soft spot for Johnny now. I kind of like his character because I always just assumed he was a bully. I never really liked his character before, but now you kind of get to see more of who he is. And he's quite funny, he's humorous, he's quite nice, even though he doesn't sometimes go about his training or his advice in the right way. You can really see that he has good intentions and he's got a good heart, especially when he befriends his neighbour's son. You will see sort of their relationship and their bond, and how he actually basically takes a group of outcasts and tries to create, you know, create a new dynamic for them. He makes them stronger, he makes them more confident, and that's all through karate. He might not be doing it in the best way, but he's always got good intentions with what he does. And we learned that Johnny's posh, rich upbringing really wasn't what it seemed. Turns out there was a lot of strings attached with that, because the only reason he was rich was because of his stepdad, but his stepdad didn't treat him right. And you see his stepdad in Cobra Kai as well, and their relationship and how toxic it is, and that basically just thinks that, you know, Johnny's just after the money and he doesn't want to sort of help him out and things like that. So Johnny really didn't have a good upbringing, although that's what we were led to believe in Karate Kid. And I'm not saying that now Daniel is a bad guy, because I don't think Daniel is the bad guy, but I think what Karate Kid does good is it shows that neither one of them necessarily are bad. They both have their bad and good points, because that's what life is. Nobody's perfect. You're never going to be just good all the time, you know. You're never going to do things right all the time, and I think that's what this show shows. But neither one of them are necessarily bad, like we were led to believe in the Karate Kid. It's just Daniel had obviously positive influences, his mum, Miyagi, whereas Johnny didn't have a good relationship with his parents and his stepdad, who didn't treat his mum or him right, and that's what affected his upbringing. And we see that both characters actually have kids. They have a teenager each. So Daniel has a daughter, Samantha, and Johnny has a son, Robbie, who he is not very close with. He's not with Robbie's mum anymore, so he doesn't really have a strong relationship with his son. He doesn't really see him. I don't think he at that point really tried to have a relationship with Robbie, but we see as the show goes along and he meets Miguel, his neighbour's son, and he starts obviously bonding with him, that he then now regrets not having a relationship with his own son, because he's grown as a character. you know, Cobra Kai and Miguel have basically given him a purpose that he probably didn't have since being part of Cobra Kai in the 80s. And I think that makes him now realise he needs to have a relationship with his son. He needs to try harder, he needs to be a better person for himself, but obviously for his son as well. And I think that's because of his relationship with Miguel. Then we see Johnny open Cobra Kai, but obviously his intentions are not the same as Kreese's intentions, although they still have the same motto: strike first, strike hard, no mercy. Although I don't think Johnny is as bad as Kreese. I think when he initially opened Cobra Kai, he wasn't, you know, this softie that we see him become. He was still quite tough and hard, and he would make fun of the kids, but the way he was doing it was to try and build their strength and give them confidence. And as it goes along, we see the kids actually teaching him and Miguel teaching him and turning him into a better person. And then he realizes he never wants Cobra Kai to be what it was back in the day. Even when Kreese comes back, I think it was at the end of season 1, when Kreese comes back and Kreese starts to slowly try and take over, Johnny really sees the negative side of Cobra Kai and what Kreese is trying to do, and he's trying to take Cobra Kai back to what it was, even though he is definitely opposed that. And you'll kind of see how that develops as a storyline. And then because Johnny has opened up Cobra Kai, Daniel starts now wanting to open up his own dojo, Miyagi-Do, and really relive that legacy of who he was back in the 80s, winning the tournament, but also honour Miyagi's legacy as well through karate. And we learned that he used to teach his daughter Samantha karate, but they stopped doing that. And now we see him slowly going back into that, transforming part of his home into a dojo and training his daughter, and then he takes on Robbie and starts training him as well. You see that their roles have really reversed, because now Johnny is the underdog. Now you're rooting for Johnny. You want him to do well. You want him to succeed. You want him to have a relationship with Robbie. You want him to have a successful dojo. You want Cobra Kai to be different. You want it to succeed in a different way. You don't want it to be what it was back in the day, and you really want to see Johnny now rise to the top, become a better person and turn his life around. And that doesn't take away, you know, what you feel towards Daniel. It's just you're now opening your eyes to Johnny and more of what he went through, and you're now trying to uplift and build him up and see him grow as a character. The show is great. But the humour is even better, especially Johnny. He's like the most funniest character. He has such quotable lines, and I love that character. Like, I never thought I'd say that, but I love that character. Just some of the stuff he comes out with, especially the way he interacts with his students. It's just so funny, especially him and Miguel. You know, when his students say something and he always comes back with something really sarcastic or witty, and it's just so funny. And the fact that, obviously, like I mentioned with technology, he's just so delusional when it comes to technology. He doesn't really know much about it, but we see him learning. He gets a laptop. We see him learning how to use the laptop, how to use the Wi-Fi, and then we see him create a Facebook page where at the end of season 1 he adds or friends Ali on there, and we start to see more of how that develops as well.
Alright, you want my advice? Stop being so annoying. Maybe you'll stop getting your ass kicked.
As the show goes on, it's really developed a savvy self-awareness, which I think is just brilliant in the way it's done, in the way it's written by the creators. Just the dialogue, and I love how they reference the 80s and nostalgia quite a lot, but they always bring it back to present day, and they don't try to just throw nostalgia in your face. You know, they want to make it, you know, new and current for a new generation, but you still have the good aspects of what the 80s were. And if you grew up in the 80s, or even if you grew up in the 90s and you still, you know, remember certain things, you will really relate to Cobra Kai, and you kind of feel you've grown up with these characters and with with Karate Kid, even though it's been 30 years since you actually saw these characters. The show has effectively taken aspects from what the Karate Kid had brought to our screens. You have scene for scene shots, you have never before seen footage from the tournament, you have Okinawa. We know that Daniel goes back to Okinawa to feel closer to Miyagi, and we also bring back Ali in season 2. Is it season 2 or season 3? Anyway, we bring back Ali. We know Kreese has come back. We bring back Ali. We introduce new characters as well, and we see that dynamic between Ali, Daniel, and Johnny. And it's still the same, but not really. Now we see her sort of getting back with Johnny a little bit and really reminiscing about things. And it kind of is a good closure for both of those characters, because obviously now Daniel's married, you know, there's this fine line between her spending time with Daniel now compared to Johnny, who's single, although he's not really single, he's dating his neighbour. But we really see that dynamic and what could have been between her and Johnny, you know, if Daniel never came into town, and we kind of explored their relationship a little bit. So I'm hoping Ali will be in the show more as the next season sort of airs. But yeah, I'm hoping we'll bring up more characters. I think the only thing missing now is basically bringing back Hilary Swank from the next Karate Kid. That'll be the only thing that's literally missing from Cobra Kai. And obviously we're missing Mr. Miyagi, who sadly passed away, you know, the actor Pat Morita. So it's sad that he's not in it, but I like the way they're honouring his legacy, and they're always mentioning Miyagi, and his influence is there in the way that Daniel teaches his daughter karate, teaches Robbie karate, and just in every little day things that he does, you can really see Mr. Miyagi's influence. So I love the way he's done that. And I'm glad they've chosen to honour him in that way. It proves that even the most unexpected ideas, if done in the right way, if done with love, if done with heart, if done with the right amount of humour, can really work and really live up to the original. It does justice for the Karate Kid and Karate Kid fans, because I know for me, I was scared hearing that Cobra Kai was going to be made, and I was scared to watch it because I was like, please don't ruin a film that I love. But it hasn't, because it didn't just focus on that same story and following Daniel's perspective. We see it through Johnny's perspective, and I think that is just the genius part of Cobra Kai, and a lot of other films or TV shows haven't been able to do that, and which is why they never live up to the original. And I'm glad it was in the right hands, and I'm glad they actually made it, because this is a fantastic show. Also, what we see in Cobra Kai, which we didn't get with Karate Kid, was we get to expand the universe, expand the storylines, dig deeper into the characters' backgrounds, who they are, into their families, into new characters. We see that even with the kids. We really see their backstories with Miguel, with Tori, who are sort of outside characters, but it's good to also see how the dynamic of Daniel and Johnny in the 80s now reflects the teenage characters in modern day life, and now how they're trying to deal with that. I think I really found a new love for these characters and a new love for this classic, and I think a lot of people have as well, because really, it's the best around. Thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you like that little bit at the end, because it's the best. And if you haven't watched Cobra Kai, then I really recommend you go watch it. I think I'm going to go rewatch it because I haven't seen it in a minute, and I might do some reactions for that as well. But let me know in the comments what you thought about this video, what you thought about Karate Kid, what you thought about Cobra Kai, and if you are a fan, and if you're more of a fan of Daniel or Johnny, because now I'm like confused as to which one I like more. But thank you again for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Mwah!